speaking of Pulisic and his former club Dortmund have signed someone. That deal is now across the line. Felix Nmecha joins from Wolfsburg for a deal between 30 and 35 million euros. That's a big package, a really big package, although it is just a fraction of what they earned from the Bellingham transfer. Again, lots of noise around that because he shared homophobic content on his Instagram channel. I kind of want to put a cap on that for now because he's gone and apologized in public. He wants that fans should give him. He said that he hopes Borussia Dortmund fans give him a chance. He's 22 years old. I think he deserves a chance. I think it's important that this was pointed out. I think it's important that he gets monitored for it, and it's important that voices like the fan groups had a strong voice about it. And I think he had to meet with several of the groups, right, and had to meet with the board and discuss this topic. So I think it's actually good it got this attention. But I think for now we need to maybe bury that topic and say, let's give the kid a chance and focus on his on-field stuff. And when you look at his on-field stuff, first of all, he's German. So Dortmund actually have gone out and replaced an English player with a German player. So that is one of the things that we addressed earlier in this podcast. So it looks like they actually bring in a player, who could actually have upside for the German national team, which is great. And you know what? I think while this has a potential to be disastrous, I want to point this out too. Stefan, I actually also think this has a potential to work out really well. Because this is a player who fits Bellingham's profile quite well, has an enormous amount of upside. If Dortmund manage his off-field personality well, this could be one where we 35 million seems steep now, but maybe in a few years we'll say, this was actually a good transfer.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, he is German, but he's also ticks another box, which is ex-Man City youth graduate, which we all know my Dortmund absolutely adore.
Love.
Yes. I tweeted out that meme of the guy behind the tree licking his lips saying, Dortmund when there's a Man City youth graduate up for grabs. Yeah. It's an interesting one. I think when we first talked with Felix Nmecha on the show a few weeks ago, we kind of talked through his attributes.
Did I call him Lucas? That's his brother, of course.
Yeah. Sure, it happens all the time. I think, because his brother's obviously a striker, isn't he? So it's a little different. Yeah. But I think, on paper, he looks like a smart signing. He can kind of play that box-to-box or number 10 role. My only real concern is that I think when we talked about it at the time, the deal was maybe 18 or 20 million euros, and it has ballooned up. Maybe I'm mistaken, maybe I've just not read the right reports, but I kind of I've been getting the impression over the last couple of weeks that this deal has just been going up and up and up and up. And we're now at a point where 30 or 35 million euros, which is a lot of money for Dortmund. I'm not sure what their transfer record is, but I don't think it's far off that, to be perfectly honest with you. Unless what you guys can think off the top of your head what it might be.
It's the same with bonuses. It's just below Sebastian Haller, which is their transfer record.
Right. So we're talking about a player here who already demands from his transfer fee that he has to be a good player from the get-go, and maybe I'm being harsh there. Of course I could be, but I think and that's my only real issue with this deal. Felix Nmecha for 18 or 20 million euros seems like a good get because he's a player who can kind of drift in and out of squad, drift in and out of the first team. He can take time developing, whatever else. But, for 30 or 35 million euros, he's all of a sudden a player who kind of has to hit the ground running. And while he has shown talent at Wolfsburg, while he has shown he can perform in the Bundesliga, I'm not entirely sure he's really at a point where he's kind of knocking the barn doors down in terms of his performance for Wolfsburg week in, week out. I think he's actually, maybe we won't go so far as saying consistent, but he's just a young kid who's still learning his trade. So that's my only concern with this deal, that transfer fee has ballooned up to a point where there's now added expectations on him, whereas before he could have just kind of been almost like a Julian Brandt understudy or whatever else you want to call it. But it's a large chunk of Dortmund's transfer budget, so I guess he's going to have to perform, isn't he?
What did you make of this deal?
Yeah, as Stefan said, it's a lot of money, but I think he's a little bit younger, so you're paying for that. You're paying for that longevity. So I think if you're going to pay for someone like Sebastian Haller, who's already proven player, you're going to pay a lot more for that. And I think sometimes you have to pay above the odds with younger players because you're going to get them for longer. And it's a gamble. Obviously, it comes with a lot of off the pitch issues. Can he do it on the pitch? I'm going to be saying I'm quite cynical that there's maybe an eye here, and Stefan's already mentioned why, because of his history. Can we develop this player? Can we flip him? Can we flip him in 2 years for double the money? And that's a win for Dortmund. I would hope to God that's not what the plan is, because as we've already said for Leipzig, they need players to win the league. I think they did do that when they brought in the likes of Sula. That's a great player to bring in with the experience of winning leagues. That's the type of player you want. And yeah, I would have preferred them to have replaced Bellingham with I know he is more, you can say he's Bundesliga proven, but an older, experienced Bundesliga proven player who can maybe take him to that next step. But then they'd have to get someone from Bayern, and then it becomes the opposite way to what everybody thinks. But I'm going to say I'm going to sit on the fence until I've seen him play, and then if he is poor, we can all say, well, we thought he would be anyway. But I don't know if it marks a statement of intent. The money does, of course, but the name doesn't. And yeah, I think you need to have the pull. And Dortmund, have they got that pull at the minute? Probably a rhetorical question.
What would you still? I mean, you followed Dortmund for a long time, of course, Chris, and I would even go as far and say that you're a Dortmund fan. What would you like to see them do for the rest of the window? Because obviously that's not enough.
No, it's not. I think you need to bring. I think so. The back's not too bad for me, and their attack isn't too bad. I think they need proven midfielders. So when they've been in instances last season where the games got away from them, Stuttgart was a good example of that, and Bochum as well. When the games, it's great when you win it. Everyone's on side, but you need those older heads to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and say, right, we just need to calm down for 10 minutes. We need to get that play. Now, whether they look around, then there's plenty of players in Frankfurt, I think, who've got that ability, especially with their Europa League run. But that's what they need to be doing. They need to be bringing in that caliber player. And if they can't get it from Germany, then look to similar leagues where they can get from proven winners. So look in the Eredivisie, look at who's won the league in those central midfield areas and wide midfield areas, and can we pull them in? Like Stefan said, I think sometimes they take a risk. Is this kid going to be good? Is he the next new lightning winger? Is he the next YouTube star? That's not going to win you a title. And at the minute, Dortmund had closed that gap to 1-2 points. You don't want to see it widen, because I can tell you now, Bayern had a bad season in inverted commas for them, and they will be going all out to be a lot better this season. And that's why I'd really like Leipzig and Dortmund to be able to match them. I know they're not going to match them, but I'd like it to give it a go consistently, not over just a 10-game run after Christmas.
Yeah, I think that Bayern, I'm very curious about them getting heavily involved in this Harry Kane transfer, because it might mean that they overlook other homework that they need to do, which is a chance for Dortmund and Leipzig, I think. And I think Dortmund still have to do quite a lot of work. I mean, the Edson Alvarez is probably one that, when you look at it, fulfills a lot of the criteria that you mentioned, Chris. A grizzled midfielder, from a club that has won the title in the Eredivisie in Ajax, brings a bit more experience. I've kind of looked at Union Berlin and like the players that they have in their midfield. There's a lot of grizzled veteran players in there, and we kind of in Germany have overlooked that you need those players to win. This goes to the German national team as well. I mean, I know, Stefan, you have made this point. Sometimes you just need an Anderlecht to do the right foul, or just hold another player accountable at the right time. And these players are not the most talented on the field, but they're very, very important. In Germany, we call them Wasserträger, the water carriers, right? And there isn't enough of them in any of these teams. Like even Bayern Munich don't really have one. And I think you see that go all the way to the German national team, and then maybe that is what Dortmund need to do. I thought the Süle signing was very smart of them last year, because look, he has lots of flaws, but he knows how to win, right? And I think they need to do something like that in midfield. Is that something you guys agree with?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And, I'm speaking to people over the course of the season about, Robert Andrick's a perfect example. And he's really well regarded at Leverkusen because not only in terms of what he does on the pitch, but also just like his personality off it. And
yeah,
it is something that Dortmund need. It's something that Bayern need as well, because their only defensive midfielder to name is Joshua Kimmich, who, doesn't even let a hair fall out of place most games. So, that just kind of, and of course, Bayern can kind of get away with that for 90% of the games because they just park on the edge of the opposing team's box and get away with it. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion for Dortmund because they were obviously like with Edson Alvarez, that deal seemed to kind of get away from them. And, I must admit, from what I've seen of him, from the stats I've looked at, he seemed like a decent player, but maybe not a player to kind of blow their whole budget on. But we're still kind of waiting to see who they maybe have elsewhere in mind. It's going to sound lazy because I've already mentioned him on the show, but I actually think someone like Sabitzer would actually be a smart move for Dortmund as well. Because, I actually thought Konrad Laimer would have been a perfect signing for Dortmund if they could have convinced him to come. As a kind of, I think he would have made a great Bellingham replacement for the most part. But maybe someone like Sabitzer who can kind of play just about every role in that midfield three, and obviously has a lot of kind of attacking intent as well, would be a handy player. But I definitely grow concerned by the day at these reports, which seem to kind of gather pace. That you see a lot of the kind of local media being briefed by the club saying, it started off with, should Emre Can get a new contract, to the next week, oh, the club respect and appreciate what Emre Can's done, to the week after that, Emre Can is due a new contract because he did so well last season. Now it's the club don't feel the need to sign on our defence midfielder because Emre Can was so good last year. And you can understand Dortmund fans pulling their hair out over this because Emre Can was good, but he wasn't Superman. He wasn't the kind of player. He's certainly not a Jude Bellingham replacement, mostly because he played alongside Jude Bellingham for most of last season. So that's a baffling notion in itself. But I think I completely agree with what Chris was saying. I think up front, Dortmund are absolutely fine. I think they'll probably really benefit from next season's defence, where Niklas Sula will hopefully be fitter and perhaps more reliable. And of course, Schlotterbeck will have had a full season to embed himself. I'm expecting a lot more from him next season. So I think for the most part, they're fine at either end of the pitch, but they definitely probably, even after Nemcha's now come in, I think they probably now have to spend another 50, maybe even 60 million euros on our two players, I think, to kind of fix that midfield. And if they can do that, then I think they've got enough talent there to kind of see what they can do next season. But it's a big if at this moment in time.
I think Gundogan would have been the player to come in. If they could have convinced him to come back, I think he would have solved a lot of problems. And a little bit like when Leipzig signed Werner, it was a statement of intent. I think if it was me, if I'm the Dortmund hierarchy, I would have done everything I could have to try and made him sign. I know, obviously, but you can't compete with Barcelona. Having been to both cities many a time to cover football, you can't compete with Barcelona. I love Dortmund and I love the people of Dortmund, but it's very industrial, as we say in the Northwest. He would have been the player for me. He would have been the Sebastian Haller version of a midfielder. The player can score the goals. Or Gundogan is a player can score goals, link between defence, run the midfield. He would have been the one. He would have been the missing link, I think. Had they signed him, I think I might have got him on the back of my Dortmund shirt. Would have scrubbed out the Bellingham one and got him on the back of it. But they need a player like that, and they're very hard to find, unfortunately.
Yeah. One final point, Manu, before I let you jump in, because I've been waiting patiently. If I was Dortmund, I would have maybe, in the middle of negotiations for Nmecha, kind of said, well, if we throw you an extra 15 or 20 million euros, you just kind of stick Max Arnold in there with them. Because I think even just someone like that, I think he's a player who's been on the cusp of the national team for a number of years, really consistent Bundesliga player. I think something of a water carrier, as you say, in the sense, but he's also very technically gifted as well. I think a hugely underrated player in the Bundesliga because he's kind of had to deal with a lot of turmoil at Wolfsburg, a lot of players and coaches coming and going. I think he deserved a lot more than what he probably has achieved over the course of his career. And I'd love to see him at a top four side like Dortmund. And he would have been a great player, I think. But yeah, we'll wait and see.
I think my final name to throw in there I would have gone to Union Berlin and signed Rani Khedira. And maybe that could still happen. Rani Khedira had a great season and is developing a lot. A little bit of a late bloomer, but he's looking a lot like his brother Sami when he was at his best. And that could probably be the one that you need. Now that you have signed your more creative player, you need a good backup for Emre Can. And I mean, Rani Khedira is on the fringes of the national team as well, right? So that is the guy I would go after. Maybe it still happens. Dortmund have gone to Union Berlin in the past, right? To Ryerson, for example. But yeah, I think we're entering the territory of speculation, guys, which is probably a good plot to end this podcast.